Coming up in this episode of Finding Common Ground.
I have good issues because instead of turning it negative and said, well, nobody was there for me, I try to support my kids as much as possible.
Everybody thinks it's great to be the boss. Well, your name's on the line too, and you know something bad happens, you're on the hook for it. If you have free will, and let's say I want to go plant a garden, then I should be able to plant the garden and then reap what I sow.
Just watching people stare at each other bickering about Trump, it's just tiring. It's America on a whole right now. It's just like in a very frustrated place.
There are two sides to every coin.
How do we deal with racial issues when they affect relationships?
Finding common ground on all those issues that we come against.
There's black and there's white.
And I think as Christians, we have to learn how to get together because we're not in heaven.
I've met more interesting people just by God just bringing them in.
Republicans and Democrats.
But a lot of times when it comes to race and it comes to culture and it comes to perception, even as Christians, we don't always understand. We look at it through our lenses.
There's Bill.
I grew up in a suburb of Cleveland called Parma.
Any black people in Palmer?
There was not one.
Not one black person,
Not
Bill?
one.
Come
Not
on, Bill,
one.
you got to have one. A
Nope.
token black person? A token?
And there's Odell.
I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, public housing, single mom, divorced single mom of 4 kids, and I came up through segregation and all that kind of stuff.
If a black person drove through the town, the police would stop and escort them out.
Bill and Odell are finding common ground.
A part of what we have to do is listen to each other, find the common ground, and question, not questioning you like you're on a witness stand, but questioning you for better understanding. Look ahead, Lord. It's me again, your boy, Odell Cleveland, back asking for you to continue to bless us and keep us. Just thank you for all the blessing. Thank you for just waking up this morning. Just thank you for your grace and your mercy. And thank you for allowing us to live in this great country that we call the United States of America. In Jesus' name we pray and believe. Amen.
Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for our friends that are here. Marty Kotis, the Maverick, and Kelly Hahn. And we just ask for blessings on their families as they go about their time here. We ask for blessings on this podcast, that it be pleasing to you and pleasing to our audience. Amen.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of free will and help us use that freedom wisely. You've called for us to be stewards, not just of our choices, but of the resources and property you entrust to us. Remind us that thou shalt not steal points to a deeper truth, that ownership is not just about rights, but responsibility. Guide our words today and let this conversation reflect your justice, grace, and design for human dignity. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Well. The first 100 days of President Trump, I got the Jiffy Pop popcorn out here. I'm on there shaking, it's popping, it's good. So I'm just going to open it up and just smell it. Jiffy Pop, because in South Carolina, in Geechee land, the dirt roads of South Carolina, we have a saying. And the saying say, you're right for say so, but you're wrong for do. I know none of you fine, educated gentlemen speak Geechee land from the dirt roads of South Carolina. But let me explain what I'm saying. You're right for say so, but you're wrong for do. What that means is you have the right to do what you are going to do, but you shouldn't do it. So with that, I don't know, Kelly, do you speak Geechee? Do you speak Swahili? Do you speak anything? But Kelly, the floor is yours, sir. The first 100 years, President Donald Trump is celebrating.
Wait a minute.
Wait. 100 years?
We're not doing Trump.
100 years of Trump?
Oh, okay, my bad. Trump said he's going to be a president the first 100 days. Well, it feels like 100 years. Go ahead, Kelly.
You could have an AI version of him that lasts for 100 years.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't
Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so.
4 years and 100 days of Trump is more than I can
Do
handle.
you think his hair would still be the same in 100 years?
I don't know. You've got, pharaohs entombed with hair still intact, I think. So maybe.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't think about that. Oh my gosh. You know, in the communist countries, their leaders, they put them in a glass casket and they petrify them. And I went when I was in China, and when it first opened, I think it was the second year in 1984, I was there and we were going on a tour, and they ask you things if you want to do. And I was there for a combination of business and work. I wanted to see a factory that made consumer product goods, and which they had none, and other than toothpaste. And I wanted to see retail, and but I also wanted to see Mao Zedong's tomb, which is behind the Forbidden City in Peking. And the guide we had was a communist, a great guy, and he said that it's going to be very difficult. And I learned going to school studying Chinese history that meant no, because it was dishonorable to say no. So when it's say it's very difficult, that just means no. So I just backed off, and about halfway through the trip, he goes, Bill, we've decided that you can go see Chairman Mao's mausoleum. And I said, well, is anybody else coming with me? He said, no, just you and some of these communist guys. And I'm going, okay, let's see here. I'm going to leave the group in China. I don't speak the language, but we went, and it was amazing. He was in a glass casket, and he was propped up on like sideways so he could sit up, not sit up, but it was like laying on a bed, propped up, and it looked just like him. So maybe we ought to do this with Trump.
Not to get sidetracked, but you had the Pope's funeral.
Yes.
Which, it's interesting. Instead of focusing on the Pope and his accomplishments, we're talking about how someone's dressing. So I think we're seeing this reality TV come over into even the Vatican, in effect.
Yeah.
And you saw people whipping out cell phones and taking photos and selfies. That, to me, was the real issue of decorum there. Not, 7 or 8 people wearing a blue suit instead of a black suit.
Yeah.
I think probably people that were wearing a blue suit, if they were going to wear a black suit, they wear a tux. They just weren't going to wear a black suit for that. And why would we have conformity? It's one of my issues, I think, with some churches where you feel like you have a certain dress code. And I feel like that takes away from the idea of your relationship with God if it's set. Now, if it's just kind of a general norm that everybody feels like they should, that's fine. But I don't think, someone should be singled out for not dressing a certain way.
At least he didn't wear the red tie.
Yeah.
Yeah, the red tie might have been a little standout. But
Yeah.
Remember when they did that to Obama when he wore like a khaki suit to a formal meeting?
That's President Obama, please.
I was
President-
also
I'm
thinking that
sorry.
maybe some of this was the bulletproof vest that they're wearing, or they have these like John Wick type suits
Yes.
that are
Yep.
custom for them. So maybe he didn't have anything other. If he's going to wear a black suit,
He only
maybe
bought one.
a tuxedo, and you can't get a bulletproof suit made that quickly or something.
Biden showed up in a tux, so maybe he doesn't need bulletproof anymore.
Did Biden know he was there?
His wife was holding his hand.
That's good. That's the whole 4 years of his presidency.
Odell, come on, jump in here.
Listen, I'm still remembering when Trump beat Biden in that debate, and when it was all said and done, he kicked Biden in his behind, and all the dust came out of Biden's pants. I mean, I have to give the man credit. Hey, I ain't never seen nobody got beat that bad. I was wanting to throw in the towel. I was embarrassed, and I'm hardcore Democrat. I was embarrassed. It was embarrassing.
Bill and I, we were talking before we all got together, and I was commenting that we've entered the pile-on phase of the Trump administration. He came in with a lot of excitement. There was the Trump bump in the economy, and there was just a pretty good feeling in the business community that the right guy had been elected in terms of business, and a little blood in the water. And here we are at the 100 days, and he's a wounded duck. I mean, at least I wouldn't say he would think he's a wounded duck, but at least in the media, and now people are starting to talk and starting to pile on. And one of the things that we did talk about in this podcast a couple of weeks ago, when both Marty and myself were here, was whether or not it was possible for Trump to win a trade war, given our media, given that we have democracy compared to China and a one party system. And I think that we answered that question pretty clearly. I don't think the media or other people are going to allow Trump to win a trade war. And I have mixed emotions about that. And I want Marty's comments on this as well. I have mixed emotions because I stand by what I said in the last podcast. I don't think that I can give you a laundry list of reasons why I don't like Trump. And he gives us plenty to dislike.
Amen.
But that being said, I did agree with him and his policies on China. Where he lost me was when he went after all of our allies, when he went after other countries and countries that we don't have a trade imbalance with. But my point is that I don't think we're going to be allowed to win a trade war, and it will be on the media, it will be on the court of public opinion that we lose this trade war. I don't think it's because it wasn't the right idea. We can debate the approach, Marty.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is this attack on anything Trump right now. So if Trump wears a blue suit, it's the most horrible thing ever. And doesn't matter if other people are doing it. Doesn't matter if that is the most important thing. There's going to be something that they're going to single out and say it's the wrong thing. But if you come back to the fundamental ideas on tariffs or a lot of the other changes that he's making, I think it relates back to some of the topics we've been discussing, maybe talking about today, which is, fruits of their own labor or property rights. And the idea that it's a fundamental freedom to own and control what's yours, your body, your labor, your ideas, your land, your intellectual property. And tariffs and fair trade are an attempt to kind of right that ship. And the dereg effort that they've done in kind of shrinking the size of government with Doge is the idea to get government out of your lives as much. I think there's kind of two schools of thought. There's a school of the government will solve all problems, which some people have, and that, communism has shown that fails time and time again. And then you've got the belief in people solving their own problems. And I think that ties back to, and the reason I mentioned it in the prayer is, ties back to free will, this idea of we don't want someone else telling us what to do. And I think everyone agrees with that until they're like, but I don't want you to be able to do this. So I'm going to take my will and impose it on you. And so that's the rub is this conflict. I think that, big picture items, free will, freedom to choose your various rights that you're entitled to under the Constitution, the U.S. and the state Constitution, and the right to the benefit of your own labor and to have your own property. All of that is kind of wrapped up in some of these economic and regulatory reforms.
Yeah, good point. It's you talk about government and rights and the ability to make our own decisions about our direction we want to go. This is the only country that really does that in a big way.
Yeah, a rugged individualism.
Yeah,
right?
you can go work for somebody and make an hourly wage, or you can start a business. And we've got a bunch of business people here that have started businesses. It made me think about, and this is down to the local level. In our town, there was a big hoopla about leaf pickup. The city stopped it for a number of reasons, some of which are good and some aren't. But, people really went up in arms over it. It became a very controversial item. And my viewpoint is, if you want smaller government, this is what happens. You're not going to get leaves picked up. If you want smaller government, you're not going to get your roads paved every week or every couple of years. The government does certain things that the individuals can't. Like, for example, you might be able to afford a sewer system. The average person can't. So the city puts one together so we're not contaminating water. And same thing, like, why do we stop at a red light? To let other people by, right? We don't run a red light. We shouldn't. So there's certain things that the government, military is another one. Defense, we really need them to step in that. And thank God we got a great defense. Military. So I think it's important. Marty, you hit a good point.
Yeah, I think generally my view as a libertarian leaning conservative is that the government should do the bare necessities and we should let the private sector and nonprofits do a lot of other things. And that way people can opt in. I think on the leaf collection issue, it's all about everybody when they're paying taxes. And I feel it more than a lot of people do with property taxes.
Yeah, I bet you do.
And each December I turn into the Grinch as I'm sitting there writing these checks, and it's really annoying. But
yeah, we don't go up by you in December. We stay away from the party.
It is it's a.
I feel your pain, by the way.
And you think about why, and it's kind of annoying to think you'd be taxed on one type of asset. You're not taxed on your bank account. You're not taxed on your stocks. You're taxed on real estate. You're not taxed on your inventory necessarily. You're taxed on fixtures. And so it's a very arbitrary approach. But then what do you get for that tax? You know, what's the benefit of the bargain, the return on investment for the person paying the tax? And I think that's where it's a little unfair right now, the current system. You know, in a perfect world, you would charge a use tax. I know there's been some discussions about a prepared foods tax where people would pay tax on prepared meals and restaurant food to then pay for things like sports complexes. Well, from my standpoint, I'd rather just have facility fees to pay for that. I think that you charge the people that use something to do that. And I would apply that probably to leaf collection as well and say, if you want your leaves collected, you pay for that. But that's assuming they're not having to pay property taxes. If you've got a large piece of land and you're paying a huge amount of property taxes on it, and then you're not getting the same benefit as the person next door, and yet you're paying for a lot of these things, you may want certain things funded out of it. And that's the challenge, is when we put all of our money into one big pot, then everybody wants to have a say. For instance, I have no say because I'm not a city resident. So I get to pay taxes, but I don't get to vote for.
Yeah. And then you, on top of that, you pay a tax on an arbitrary number that they can make up. And the only leverage you have is to fight it with the government, right?
Yeah, good luck with that.
Good luck with that. I mean, I can't tell you every single time, every 2 years we get reassessments, and every 2 years we go to war, and we usually get about half of what we ask for or a quarter of what we ask for. And yet they continue to decrease services. They continue to decrease the voices of the people that pay the highest amount of taxes. And this is a classic conservative view, you know, and I don't want to get into like poll taxes and going all the way back, but you know, the people that pay the most taxes really, unless you're Elon Musk, you have the least opinion. And so it's you raise a great point, Marty, in terms of what you pay for versus what you get back.
Yeah,
Well, that's where I think Citizens United came in, because the idea that you can then take some of your funds and you should be able to influence opinion, not especially if you have no voice. You know, for me, I have no way to affect elections by voting, and I only have, you know, if I had one, I'd only have one vote, even though I may pay tax on an awful lot of properties. So the ability to contribute to candidates or contribute to PACs or have different issue
people that
campaigns
represent
out there,
you.
you can make a difference that way.
Yeah. You know, the leaf thing, I'll tell you what bugged me was, you know, I understand leaf collection. I get it. The thing I was concerned about is if you've got to put the leaves at the curb, right? Well, a senior citizen can't do that. That's on a fixed income. They're old. For them to rake their leaves and put them in, so they got to hire somebody. So now there's a cost associated with it for seniors. So I thought it was unfair. And besides, I happen to believe that if you mulch your leaves and put them on your grass, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt anything.
You know, let me ask a question, because I'm gonna pull Bill off of that leaf, because that leaf thing just ticked my boy off. I like, come on now, don't be mess with Bill now, because now I'm coming to the rescue. But Kelly, Marty, Bill, I'm a first generation entrepreneur, you know, and my son is an entrepreneur. But you all are second and third generations. Help us understand, Bill, Marty, Kelly, when it comes to taxation without representation. You know, that's a long time. And it not that we're going there, but, you know, Kelly, you talk about things that affect your business, your livelihood, like taxes and tariffs and all this kind of stuff. And I know you're a good guy and you want to do right. What pisses you off the most about all this?
Where do you start? I mean, we only have 55 minutes for this podcast. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start. And it's a frustrating topic. I mean, when you talk about taxes and then you talk about when you invest in a property, if Marty buys a building, he's using money that was already taxed. It was income that was already taxed. Now he's investing that into a property that will appreciate. So there should be some tax repercussions on the sale. but along the way, it's just money taxed on top of money taxed on money. And that's where I kind of lose it. I've never understood how that works, especially when they're working on an arbitrary number. They can tell you what the value is. I mean, I get an evaluation. And I'm like, wow, okay, if this is the valuation, I'll sell it to you right now.
Yeah, come and get it.
You let me know. Yeah. You tell me what lawyer you want to use for the closing. I'll be there. I'll sign it over to you. And so, yeah, I mean, I could spend hours on this, and this is where my libertarian comes out, because nothing. I can't really say what I want to say, because you guys are deeply religious people, and I have a very foul mouth.
I think one of the simple ways I like to explain this to people is, let's say the four of us go and we go out to eat, and Odell orders a cheeseburger, and Kelly orders, like a porterhouse steak, 96 ounce, and I order a salad, and Bill orders a sandwich, and we get the bill, and we all split it a quarter each. At some point, you're going to start feeling like, hey, somebody's getting the better end of the deal on this, and they're getting services. And then, you're like, well, next time, what am I going to order? And it kind of builds up the, expectation. And I think that's a problem sometimes with government services. Everybody kind of wants theirs, and it just gets to be a lot. And, you go back to, that's one thing if we're all choosing to do that, and that's our choice. But, when you're not choosing it and it just happens to you, then you're kind of stuck with, you're like, whoa, that isn't what I signed up for. That wasn't my understanding to begin with.
But Maverick, you said something, and Bill, you may relate to this or may not. When I first got into corporate sales, we would go to these national conventions, and it's like, oh, what are we doing for dinner? We say, let's just meet down there. And everybody started, get there early. I don't drink, so it's a bar tab. Well, the bar tab for folks to start drinking got moved to the dinner tab. And then all of a sudden, a couple hours later, when we finished eating, they said, okay, here's the bill. It's 6 of us or whatever. Let's split it equally. Now, I didn't know. I was a rookie. I was drinking a Sprite. I had no idea until the tab came. You're absolutely right. And it's like, I'm embarrassed in a way. It's like, well, you're a rookie. You don't want to start acting like you can't afford to play. But at the same time,
didn't you have an expense account?
No, rookies don't have expense accounts.
Let me tell you what my solution is: start drinking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was who gave away with the 2 martini lunch? Was it Carter?
I had that happen to me. I was in New Orleans. We went to original Ruth Chris with the Unilever guys. I got in late. I was the marketing guy, so I had a budget. The sales guys had been there for about 2 hours, ordered steak, wine, all this stuff. I didn't know. I show up and they said, well, we're getting toward the end. And the lady said, would you like some? I said, I'll have a bowl of soup. So I got a bowl of soup. And when I left, the guys left me with the check. It was $3,000. It blew my whole budget. Wow. I said, that was the most expensive soup I ever had. And I learned my lesson. If you're going to show up late, don't show up.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge is when we start building these government budgets, everybody kind of wants their services in there, and then it just adds up to a lot. Yeah, and I would rather see it be, it's stripped down, you do what everybody agrees to, and then, or let everybody pick up their own tab.
Yeah.
I mean, or, a services model and let people pay for what they're getting.
Yeah.
But, it's not that way, right?
I saw something before I came here, I was at Guilford County Commissioners and the school board have a joint meeting to handle this $2 billion bond and to manage it. Okay, when do you issue a bond? What rate? What's the burn rate on the money? What are the projects we're going to use? And we originally did this from 2019 before COVID, so you can imagine everything's changed. But I'll tell you what I was impressed with. The professionalism at the county commissioners' professional staff, holy cow, those guys know what they're doing. And they're trying their best to articulate to non-business people how to manage a $2 billion bond system when you're pulling out, $500 million at a time and then using it as a burn rate, what projects you're using for, and not any surprises out of it. And I could tell there were some people in that group that they had no idea what we were talking about. They just is clueless. And the questions they asked reflected that. There were a couple of them that really got it. And they were asking questions like, okay, maybe we ought to have three options, option A, B, and C. So when we start building the schools. The second thing is we don't need to build these Taj Mahals. We need fundamental solid structures. They're 21st century technology, but we don't need something that is really big. And unfortunately, the first ones they built were specialty schools, like for performing arts. Well, you need a whole different system for performing arts, robotics and all that stuff, programming. You need something different than a normal school, almost like a magnet school. Those are the ones they built. So now everybody sees those and goes, wow, look at that we overspent. And they're starting to develop. And I wanted to ask a question. What are you doing for your maintenance facilities, for your heat and air conditioning? And are we standardizing it so that if the part breaks, we can use it from another school, so that we don't have 15 different heat and air conditioning systems that, we got to get specialty parts for? That's the one question I'm going to push back on.
That's a great point. When you look at the referendums that show up on the ballot, there's always something where, do you want to pass a bond to spend X amount of money? And people will oftentimes vote for that spend. But then when it comes to the taxes listed on there associated with it, that you need to, have a 1 cent tax to pay for that, no one wants to have that on the other side of it. So oftentimes you'll see the spending approved, but then the tax not approved. And, we've got to remember, whenever we're spending money, we've got to pay for it somehow.
Amen.
There's not we don't have an oil reserve that's funding us, or a casino that's funding us here. It's
what we should get a casino downtown.
Yes.
Marty,
Yes.
Why don't you do that? You're gonna have some money coming to you in a little bit.
Then the other part of it, I think, that's really really handy is the idea of the private sector solving some of these problems. And so, when you have to spend $2 billion on a school bond, it's because and instead you could have private sector solutions and charter schools and private schools. We're not, having that same sort of expense, and yet you've got the services provided. And so I think, again, this idea of the private sector and nonprofits solving some of these problems and not feeling like the government has to do everything themselves or be involved in everything.
Amen.
So, Maverick, you have a son. You're training your son to a certain degree, part of your business. How do you mentor him through this type of
Boy,
stuff?
that's a good question.
Because what Kelly said, I'm asking Kelly. Kelly said the politics can kind of overshadow. And right now, the current president, there's blood in the water, and now people are piling on. How do you teach your son, for lack of a better term, how to deal with it, and does he listen to you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. We'll see. Sometimes he listens to me, sometimes not so. And but that's okay. I've taught him to challenge me, and I want him to challenge me to a point. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating, but did we talk about the whole concept of a pre-mortem?
No.
Yeah. So I read this article by the CEO of Panera Bread, whose parents had passed away. His father had died with some regrets. His mother had died, and she was at peace with the decision she'd made kind of in her life. And so he started this idea of looking at a pre-mortem, so envisioning his own death 3 to 5 years out and saying, if I passed, what do I need to do between now and then, relationships or faith or business success or family, whatever it may be, to feel at rest when that happens. So set these interim goals of 3 to 5 years out. And he based that on Dr. Gary Klein, I think, is the one that did the study before. And he was like you, Bill, in terms of doing these corporate modeling and training and assessment. So he'd go into a partnership and say, okay, you've got this new partnership. And he would take the different approach. He would say, imagine it failing 3 to 5 years from now.
Wow.
Oh,
What
wow.
happened? What went wrong to get you from here to that point? So what caused, this
What was the trigger?
business
What was the
to
trigger?
go to that? And so then you're setting up guardrails to say, well, I don't want all these things to happen. So I've been working on kind of a hybrid approach of that with a model for my son to say, okay, what's the guardrails, and then what are the, what's the positive outcome I'm looking for accomplishments in my life and his life in terms of working together, if we're going to work together. And so I've been trying to build that, and then we'll have him answer some questions around it. But I like that concept of a premortem where you're thinking, not that you want to pass in the next few years, but
Right.
feeling like if something happened, you would feel like you'd done what you need to do.
Yeah.
Does he have that same spirit that you have? And if I'm getting too personal, then I'll leave it alone.
No,
But
yeah.
you have that maverick spirit where you don't give a damn.
I have
Yeah, he does notice what people think more, and I think that he's sensitive to that. He hasn't been hardened by the world, maybe as much as I have over the years. Taking up arrows, writing up property tax checks,
I know
things like that. And you'll
But
you'll get a
my
little
question
bit
to
of
you,
a
Marty,
hard
is that involved like you're supposed to write your own obituary? Like, do you go that far?
That's one approach. This is more like you're sitting there, you're envisioning yourself on your deathbed. It's not what's written about you. It's more internal. It's what do you feel about yourself, which I think is more important. I'm less concerned with my tombstone or what's going to be written about me in the paper afterwards. It's how do I feel, and do I feel at peace? Have I made the right decisions that I believed in?
That's an interesting approach, because the many funerals that I go to, after listening to the speeches and the talks, I want to go and open up the casket and make sure I'm at the right funeral.
Now, I want to
my-
play.
So true. So true.
I think this is not the guy I remember.
No, who is that guy?
Yeah, I want to be cremated and have Frank Sinatra. I did it my way.
There you go.
Like that.
I saw a guy, a YouTube video of a cowboy that got cremated, and the urn was on the back of the horse, and they had his horse running, and all this dust is flying. That's how he wanted to be spread. I'm like, okay, everybody's got their own choice. I'll tell you. a funny
Well, this
story.
podcast is taking an interesting turn.
Yeah, we're going into.
Well, we're talking about a post-mortem of the last 100 days of the Trump presidency. So it's sort
Well,
of
you know,
related.
part of it though is giving back,
Yeah.
and there's 4 people here. We all have different ways that we look at that, and I always like to ask people, how do you look at it? Because different people. Like, I asked Royce Reynolds one time, who owned a bunch of auto dealers. I said, "What is your philosophy?" He says, "I do not give to organizations that prolong life. I give to organizations that give to quality of life." Such as Salvation Army.
I have to
the
think
Boys-
about that. It's pretty deep.
Yeah. And it kind of set me back a little, because I didn't think, he was that deep. I have another couple buddies that, are billionaires, and I've asked them, I said, what's your given philosophy? And they're all in their 80s, late 80s. And they basically said, I want to give it away in my time, on my terms. I've taken care of my families. They're all set, but I still have a lot left.
Well, isn't there's a pact that it's the Billionaire Pact, and a bunch of them got together, and their goal was to give away their money while they're all alive.
Yeah.
I think
Bill Gates,
Warren
Bill Gates.
Buffett, Bill and his wife did it, and a few.
Well, Bill has about half of what he had.
Yeah.
He's no longer top 500 because his wife.
I feel
took half of
terrible
it.
about his net worth.
Ooh, wee. Wow. Coming in hot, Mr. Goble, sir, from Leaf Collectors. And he got about half. So Kelly, you have a son and a daughter, correct?
I do.
Who's your second or third, your third generation?
Yes.
What's the plans for your empire, sir?
Stay as far away from family business as humanly possible. Yeah, no, there's no accession plan for me. I want my kids to carve their own paths. In fact, my son graduates in 2 weeks, so
Congratulations.
it's coming on fast. And so,
What's he going to do?
he's got some options.
Leaf
And
collection, I suggest.
run for city politics. No, I don't know. It's it's funny because we were having a conversation, and I remember I graduated from college on Friday, and my mom met me, and we loaded up my car and her car, and we headed out for my first real job that started on that Monday. I mean, I
Wow.
basically had less than 72 hours to enjoy life, and I think my philosophy now is a little bit different than maybe my dad's philosophy was for me, which is get to work. And I was anxious. When I was in college, I couldn't wait to be out of college. I wanted to go earn my own money. I wanted to make and carve my own path. And so it wasn't like I was reserved about like, oh, I want to go, goof off in Europe for a summer or anything like that. But now I have that opposite feeling. Like I feel like I want my son to go enjoy life for a little bit before he starts his real world adventures. And we're talking about these postmortems, and oftentimes you'll say, why in retirement do we enjoy life when life is meant to be enjoyed when you're young? You should have more fun when you're young, because when you're older, you can't enjoy the experiences quite as deeply. And so, yeah, but as far as like plans or session plans or things like that, no, there's nothing in those lines.
Yes. I think you bring up a good point. I think the old model was, and from those that were raised during the Depression, want to make sure, and this is really like biological, right? You want to make sure the young that you're about to push out of the nest can take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think that's still a very important thing to do. So you want to have your children be able to take care of themselves, make sure they can protect themselves, or they can provide for themselves or provide for their families. And then I think the other part of it is making sure they're enjoying life along the way, and they're having the loving relationships, they're having the faith, they're getting all the things that make life matter out of it too, and balancing all of that. And so I think that's really the goal there is making sure your children can provide for themselves and be happy.
But the foundation that you were asking about, I think it's instilled. I mean, I don't worry about like my son trying to be on my payroll for the rest of his life. Like I don't have that concern. I know he wants to carve his own path.
Well, he's going to get all the money when you die anyway.
Oh, I'm going to spend it all.
Nah. But to that point, Bill, Marty, Kelly, Odell, how much is too much? I love my boys. Now, my situation is different from you all. My father wasn't there. So I've been spending most of my life trying to make sure I do for my family wasn't what was done for me. I know I have issues, but I have good issues, because instead of turning it negative and said, well, nobody was there for me, I try to support my kids as much as possible. But how much is too much, Bill? How much is too much? How much giving is too much? Because I can't take the money.
Well, you see it in this, everybody gets a trophy society about like, you want your kids to do so well that you actually do the work for them. I know there's parents that are like that. I've taken that approach.
You mean science projects?
Anything, whatever it is. They want their kid to be the best. They want them to get the highest grade. The parent will write the paper, whatever the case may be. I mean, but we brought that on ourselves with, we don't want to turn this into a how we raise kids, because everybody has a different opinion on that. But it's a weird time. Like I'm quite thankful I grew up Gen X. I'm very happy that we were misfits and nobody knew about it, because there was no telephones to record it
But to your point though, Bill, I'm finding people of all different levels in society right now saying, my kid got laid off. They were working for the research department in something, and because of governmental cutbacks, PhDs. Mm-hmm. Upper middle class, I don't know upper class, don't know their political affiliation, but I don't think we realize just how much and how wide the government was. So my philosophy is, should I allow my children to hit rock bottom to prove a point, or can I catch them here and work with them and allow them to regroup? What say you, Mr. Goebel, sir?
I think it depends on the kid. Each kid is different, and you have to find out, some kids, if you help too much, it's bad. Some kids don't want to help. They want to struggle, but you can be there.
Will, as you're driving that 18-wheeler down the mountain, don't let go of the wheel. Your daddy don't mean it. Don't let go of the wheel. Will Goebel.
It's funny because, we live in a world where the word entrepreneur is it's a huge topic of conversation. And before COVID, I used to go and speak on the topic, and I would get in trouble because I'm sitting here and I'm talking to kids, and I was invited by professors or by the school, and I'm sitting there saying that you're not going to learn to be an entrepreneur from going and studying entrepreneurialism. I mean, it's
Okay.
counterproductive, and
true.
it's a good way to not get invited back or cause some controversy, which like Marty, I can do. And so it's interesting because some people in the world are meant to create and to do, and some people are meant to be employees, and figuring that out is a good way to be successful.
Nothing's wrong.
There's nothing wrong with either one of them.
Right.
And they can have different journeys throughout their lives.
For
They can
sure.
start one way, end up another, or go back and forth. I think it depends on the industry and also your tolerance for risk, which, entrepreneurs have to have a pretty tough, stomach for risk, because everybody thinks it's great to be the boss. Well, your name's on the line too. And something bad happens, you're on the hook for it.
You got it.
Versus being able to go home and say, oh, it's the end of the day, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that the very first time I came on the show. I mean, that's all based on where you are at the certain point in your life. When you're young, you can risk everything. There's nothing at risk.
As we turn toward close, gentlemen, and everyone can say, how do you navigate politics when you have money, you have a business, you're trying to raise your family, you're just trying to live your life? Because politics can wear you out. It could be like a wrestle. You're like, I just don't even feel like it today. It's just too much noise. I'm trying to get this report done. I'm trying to file these taxes. How do you tune politics out when it's like the air you breathe is everywhere, Maverick?
I think you have to focus on the things that are within your control and not get too hyped up over things that are beyond your control. Now, I do think it's important that if you feel like your rights, your constitutional rights have been violated, to stand up for yourself and others, and to try and encourage folks to run. So I think the problem is a lot of us complain about politics, but most of us don't want to serve. And so trying to find some folks that are willing to serve and help. And then also everybody kind of chip in and do their part, doing work on different boards, or, go in and fix that park bench instead of complaining about the park bench. So I think chipping in, doing things yourself, adding that value, and is a more productive way than just yelling at the TV. Maybe.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, and I think you have to be smart enough to decipher through the biases of what you're watching.
You mean the spin,
whatever. I mean, you can read, you can find out what's going on, you can study it and have a grasp of the situation. But it seems that you have now the news, depending on the channel, steering the motive that serves them the best. And that's the frustrating thing. I always tell my friends, I don't watch the news anymore. I mean, I still consume news, but it's, in different ways. But just watching, people stare at each other bickering about Trump, it's just tiring. You deal with it all day, and then you find yourself being irritated by the whole thing. I think America on a whole right now is just like in a very frustrated place.
But Bill, and I want you to have the last word, but Marty, can you go back and revisit what you stated earlier in your prayer about personal rights and property? Can you reiterate that or reread it, whatever you did, because that's important, and break it down for us, please.
Yes, I think there's two main concepts that always speak to me. One is this idea that God gave us free will, and that's a very important concept versus being controlled or puppets in a play, that we have the ability to choose what we're doing. It's also an important right to protect. We should have that right. We should not be controlled by someone else to the point where we're told what to do. And then I think the other concept, the Bible assumes property rights and talks about things like not stealing. So it's not saying all property is communal. It's saying, you're not going to steal. You're not going to covet your neighbor's wife, things like that. So there's a lot of kind of possession discussions in there, because you have to have, if you have free will, and let's say I want to go plant a garden, then I should be able to plant the garden and then reap what I sow.
Yeah.
If Bill says, hey, I don't want to plant a garden, but I'm going to come over and steal Marty's garden, that's, that's a little bit different. Then that's what leads to a lot of conflict sometimes. Yeah. Now, I do believe in safety nets and things like that, and the idea of protecting. I think that's a great thing. And I think a lot of faith organizations do that on a major scale. And you look at Billy Graham's work and Samaritan's Purse.
Excellent organization.
That's the model. I would love to see us scale down government and scale up groups like Samaritan's Purse.
Yeah, I agree. You were talking about, Bill coming and taking your vegetable garden.
Yeah,
In the
Bill.
Bible, you're supposed to leave 10%. So I'll come and get the 10%.
That's how I taught my kids about
Bill
taxes.
now has become a god.
Halloween. They learned about taxes when they were young.
You get the
I
candy.
get the first third of anything I want.
Well, Bill, I think you're the only one in the group who's a very successful businessman.
No, they got two guys here.
Well, no, I got some more to it.
Okay.
Who've ran for and held public office, elected office. How do you deal with it? What advice do you give the audience on how do you deal with it? Because you want to make a difference, but serving cost. Meaning if you're serving, you're not running your business. If you're serving and concerned about the school board and the children, who's running your business
that's a great
from
question.
that perspective?
Well, two things I noticed. One was I went in thinking that, because I'm involved in the Boy Scouts, I came in thinking people wanted to work together. And I realized that isn't necessarily the case. People don't want to, not that they don't want to work together, but they want to tear you down. And that took me a little while to get used to, because I was trying to say, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about it. And I realized that was a waste of time. Those people were never going to change. So you've got to figure out where you can impact things and work in that area. The second part of your question is a little more challenging. I think that as a public servant, you have to stay focused on the big picture from the standpoint. You still got to get into details. Don't get me wrong, but you have to. If you're involved in with the kids, what's right for the kids? Building a super expensive school, is that the right thing for the kids, or to build one school that's fairly cost effective and building 8 of them? So you start thinking about what do you got to do? So from that standpoint, it had an impact. But, I'm going to run for public office again. I'm going to run for school board in a couple of years. And people have asked me to run for city council and all kinds of other things. And, my heart is with the school board. I like those people. They're trying their best. It's a good team. It's a good culture. And so
can you make an impact though? Being on the school board, can you, as
Great
Bill
question.
Goebel, can you make an impact?
I think I can. And I'll tell you why. It's just like in business. When I started out in Boy Scouts, let me just back up. It's the same thing in Boy Scouts. When I started in Boy Scouts, I didn't even know what a district was or what a council did. I was in a troop. So I never went to the office. So when I got invited to be vice president of marketing, is on the executive committee, I didn't even know what that meant. So I'm sitting there. I remember the first national meeting I went to. I didn't have a lot of money. And I drove up to Washington, D.C. It was in D.C. It was at one of these big resorts, Marriott Resort. And I stayed at a Fleabag Hotel, took the transit to the underground transit to the place, came up. And I remember walking around and I see all these people walking around and they had these things called Key 3. And I'm going, I wonder what a Key 3 is. It must be something important. I should probably find that out. Well, I found out that's the basic structure of Scouts. 3 people in each group kind of are the leadership, all the way down to a patrol, starting with the top. So Key 3 was important. And I couldn't afford, they had dinners and breakfast, duty to God, duty to country. And I couldn't afford them. So I would sneak around behind the curtain and where the speakers were, and just sit back there and listen to the speeches. And I got to learn some things and hear some things that I never had heard before. And over the years, I started developing more and more. And that leads me into something that I wanted to share with you guys. I got a gift for you guys. As you know, I've been awarded the Silver Buffalo. And Silver Buffalo, just for our sake of our audience, 881 people, I'll be 889, have gotten it since 1925. There's been 15 presidents, 5 Supreme Court justices, Medal of Honor recipients, John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Walt Disney, a lot of, if you Google it, you'll see all the people. So I'm getting it May 15th, and I've got my coin, my Silver Buffalo coin that I like to give each of you guys, my challenge coin for you guys. and they only give me a couple hundred of these. So you guys got them.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Thank you for being recipient of that.
That's really,
Congratulations.
really cool.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Kelly, question to you, sir. All your success, all your trials, all your tribulations, help us understand not politics. You stated that there's blood in the water, and you think that sometimes people spin to keep stuff going. We love Greensboro. We love North Carolina. We love our city. What's the condition of Greensboro for a business person like yourself?
I don't think that Greensboro is well at all. You know, I'm dealing with COAs or COMs right now on a property that I have in College Hill. And I don't want to get into that because I don't want to make a bad situation worse. But I think that this is an anti-business city. And I'll say it right here and right now, bring back Robbie Perkins and bring him back now. I mean, that guy did more for Greensboro than anything that's happened post Robbie.
Well, you guys
Robbie
struggled
Perkins.
when you were remodeling the historic building that you're living in. You guys got all kinds of grief.
I've dealt with it. I just feel that this city they're so behind, and they had such a head start. I mean, it was the third largest city, but it doesn't feel like the third largest city to me. And is it still the third largest city?
It is right now, but
We're going to get.
I think very soon it's going to be the fourth and fifth largest.
I used to dump on High Point, and now I drive through High Point, and I say to myself, they're smarter than Greensboro. The way they annexed all the land all the way up to the airport, the way they're growing, they're following a similar path, but they're just seemingly, I feel like they're doing it better. So no, and as I've said, I'm a generally pretty positive person, but my dealings inside of Greensboro, they leave a very, very bad taste in my mouth, to the point where I'm going to start looking at Graham. I'm going to start looking at other places when, for our side hustle type businesses, our commercial real estate, the things that we do. We're doing more in Durham now. We're doing more in Raleigh. Greensboro is just, if something that we can't resist just happens to pop up, sure, we'll do it, but we're not aggressively or actively seeking any kind of investment in Greensboro right now.
I think there's been a big focus on the big fish, so
Explain, please.
Chasing something like Stone Brewing. I remember when I was launching Pig Pounder Brewery, and, I invested in it, did it, spent a couple of years developing it, was getting ready to launch it, and the city was courting Stone Brewing, and Stone Brewing wound up going to Richmond instead. But it was at the same time I was doing my brewery, and I didn't really get much love back then. So I think a lot of times there's this focus on the next new big deal, and not as much focus on what can we do to get those people that are already here, that are lifelong residents of Greensboro, to invest more. How can we get the government out of their way? And I think it's sometimes a self-focused viewpoint of government wanting to land that big fish and be in some way responsible for it, and not worrying about the whole tank of smaller fish and letting them just kind of starve off, and or even worse, kind of taking from them to go after.
They're looking to hook big fish, large cap. And it's the medium-sized investors and entrepreneurs that can drive the growth of this city, but they seemingly seem to be ignored.
Yeah.
Or they make the hurdles so big or so bureaucratic that you just don't even want to fight the fight, that's exactly where I'm at.
Well, it's called bureaucracy, and you gotta break through that with a business person that understands.
Or you can go places where they welcome you.
That's the other thing. Take your shoes and just move.
Yeah. I think going back to your point, Bill, about what question Odell, you asked Bill about, what do you need for someone that's going to serve? I think you need people that are going to be willing to take arrows and do things that are unpopular sometimes. You need someone that is going to research, educate themselves on an issue, and then follow through and push for those things to occur. And that's a big lift to get someone that's committed to do all those things and see that all the way through. Because some people may have good intentions, but they got no follow through at all.
Absolutely.
Or they don't educate themselves on a particular issue, and then they get a result that's not what they intended.
And Odell asked me the question: how does it impact your business?
Yes.
Okay, that's a good question, because I walked away from my businesses while I was doing that. I was going door to door. I had to collect like 3,500 signatures, standing outside at Walmart and Home Depot getting them for about 9 months, and then running on top of it. And in my case, I had developed a staff, and when we got done, I sat with them, and I was watching. We did our month-end closes and stuff. And so I asked the staff. I said, "Well, I wasn't around. What's your viewpoint?" And they said, "Our business doubled. Maybe you should run more often." I said, "I got the picture. Okay, stay away." Is what they were telling me.
I had a little bit of a similar approach, with in terms of time commitment with Board of Governors and then Board of Trustees.
Yeah.
That's, 8 years on BOG and 4 years now on Board of Trustees. Unpaid position. A lot of people think that's paid.
Yeah.
You get paid nothing. I've never turned in an expense report in all 12 years. So I've been a free worker for the university system and then University of Chapel Hill for 12 years now.
Wow.
And that's been my service back because, I was motivated to do that because I saw what our state leadership was doing to attract great talent, to, bring in businesses to the area, to make it an environment and get government out of the way. And I was like, I want to get in and do my part on this too. And it takes all of us willing to kind of chip in and donate our time and serve. And but that's a tough lift because a lot of times you put, as you know better than most, you put yourself in those crosshairs, and people are vicious.
Oh.
They will attack you, horribly. And when you're in the public eye, there's a whole different standard over slander as well.
Yeah, and now they
So
have
you'll
the
get
social
slandered.
media. There's so many means to demean somebody now.
Yeah.
With social media, there's don't make a mistake.
I was keeping track of my hours when I was on the school board and who I was visiting, what schools, and all my time. And I consult, so I get an hourly rate. I know what my hourly rate is. I wish they would have given me at least a tax deduction because that would have helped.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of money that I gave.
That's why we love you, Mr. Goble. That's why the children love you. Last word, sir, and close us out,
I just
please.
love hanging out with you guys. This is great. We didn't break any bourbon out. Maybe we have to do that next time. And tequila for my buddy Kelly. And since you're a teetotaler, you can pick up the bill for this.
What's a teetotal? What's that?
That means you drink tea.
Oh, okay. Thanks you for the last word.
Martin?
Maverick, any last words?
Yeah, I just think, it's always great to have conversations with you all about different topics. And I think that this is what we need to see more of is a collaborative discussion where people get together from different viewpoints and have a reasonable discussion instead of all this kind of screaming and yelling back and forth at each other. Talk and find that common ground so that you can do things together. The yelling back and forth, I get that, I'm a fighter too on fighting for your rights, but it needs to be in a productive way and it needs to be reasoned. It doesn't need to be so personally kind of nasty or focused.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kelly, you have the last word, sir. You dropping the mic. Your thoughts, please.
The last word. It's kind of low energy for me today. It's, these are interesting topics that we talk about. And, I'm still kind of pondering that your last question to me regarding the state of Greensboro. And, we all have options of where to live. And, I've always thought maybe there's somewhere better, but Greensboro still is a great place to live. And I still, despite my issues, I still enjoy living in Greensboro. So I don't want my last comments to come off dumping on Greensboro. I think Greensboro is a fine place to live and a fine place to raise a family.
Anyone want to give predictions and or endorsements on the next mayoral race for Greensboro, sir?
I think I've been pretty clear on that.
Mr. Maverick, any questions and or concerns?
I enjoyed hearing both of your podcast interviews. I think there were elements of both that spoke to me, but I'm still following up with both candidates to kind of sort through and see what not only their vision is, but how they are going to implement that, how they're going to pull together a group to do that, and how they're going to, explain their vision to the people of Greensboro. And, I don't expect a candidate to align with me on all issues at all. You're looking for, call it 60%, 70% alignment with somebody on things. I'm glad that people are willing to run and serve. Mm-hmm. I would love to see more folks come out. And if people are looking to run, I'd like to hear from them. I'm happy to help people that are energetic. I would like to see some more new ideas come on to council, and I'd like to see some more energy come on to council, and I'd like to see some more young people get involved in politics as well.
Well, I'm keeping my powder dry at this time. However, let me say this. The Jiffy Pop popcorn is running out. Anyone who would like to advertise their political ad on Common Ground show, you contact Odell, the good-looking black guy. I see all the billboards all over town. I see the other expenditures. So if you would like to run a political ad on the Common Ground show, just contact Odell, a.k.a. the good-looking black guy. Mr. Goebel?
I think that
The slim trim, good looking black guy.
Slim trim, baby. Black is back, baby. Black is back.
we'll end on that note. Thanks, guys.
Find Bill and Odell online at thecommonground.show. This podcast is a production of BG Ad Group. All rights reserved.
Attention men, here's an important new podcast you need to be listening to.
So this whole issue about prostate and prostate health and all the challenges that we're having with it, but no one's talking. So that's the reason why I started this podcast, so we can talk, so we can get understanding. I understand I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical individual. I'm just an ordinary, normal guy who had some issues to say, hey, let's talk about this thing.
P is for Prostate with Odell Cleveland. Download anytime where you get your podcasts. And join for the full podcast at www.patreon.com/Odell Cleveland.
Whether you're a big, medium, or small business, managing and growing the bottom line is important. Focus CFO brings the experience and financial acumen of a Fortune 100 chief financial officer to your company at a fraction of the cost. P&L help, internal reporting processes, or any business transitions or events. Focus CFO will help you and your team have a CFO in your company's back pocket. Focus CFO. Learn more at focuscfo.com.